Welcome, welcome. First unscripted question. When you sit, where did we fly in from to join the show?
I flew out of New York's JFK for a nonstop flight here.
I flew in from Boston.
Boston and New York. So we've got some folks coming all the way from the East Coast. I know they've traveled further, but it's nice that they were willing to travel to be here with us.
Flight number 47 of the calendar year.
Oh, boy. Well, this is a sprint, not a marathon, it turns out. We're going to do a deep dive first. What I'd really like is to kind of get straight into it, because I know everybody here is all ears. I want to talk about the shift toward analog and experience-based travel. I know, Kassondra, you have a lot of experience with this. There are a number of trends that we're seeing in the travel industry that are experiential, that are immersive, that are slower moving. And you've really championed the idea of this slower, more immersive travel, Kassondra, with more people who are opting for rail journeys, overlanding, and extended stays. How does this shift affect the kind of gear that people need?
It is such a good question. I think we've seen so many more companies that are doing like digital detox vacations, like little teeny tiny cabins in the woods in the middle of nowhere where you go and you put your phone in a lockbox and you don't touch it for 3 days, which I'm sure everybody here loves the idea of.
I have never done it. I would find that difficult.
I'm getting jitters just hearing about that.
Personally, I love it. I think that when we do analog travel, what's interesting about that is that I think people don't actually want to be completely no tech. Like, they want tech to kind of be in the background. So you might use AI to plan your tech-free vacation. I may have done that in the past. But I think when we're doing rail journeys, when we're staying for longer periods of time in the same place, we need gear that's really versatile, because we don't want to pack so much stuff with us. If we're taking trains all over the place, we need to be more mobile. So we're not going to be bringing like 2 giant suitcases. We might need 1 rolling duffel bag or a suitcase with backpack straps. I saw one of those at Topo Designs yesterday, which is pretty cool. And we need clothes that don't stink, don't wrinkle, that we can just use in lots of different types of scenarios.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're hearing versatility, you're hearing durability, you're hearing portability. These are important to travelers who are doing things that are more immersive, that maybe require that longer journey, so they're not just hopping on a flight and putting something in the overhead bin for a couple of hours. I also want to speak to adventure travel. While we're on the topic, adventure travelers they often have to do this balancing act where they're packing light, but they're also staying comfortable, ideally. Are there any travel products or materials that you think are really revolutionizing how people travel light without sacrificing quality?
Yes, I think merino wool is an amazing material, which I've seen so much more of in the last few years. I think even just like 5 or 6 years ago, merino was not I think it was not a household name, and I think now so many companies are really changing the way that people think about wool, because typically we think of like your grandfather's wool sweater, which is really scratchy, which is not very packable, which shrinks in the wash, it's not very comfortable, but there are so many more companies today that have been making merino wool apparel that really transitions perfectly from your everyday life into your travel life, into your hiker life. You can wear the same layers in basically every single scenario, and they transition seamlessly, and they don't stink. So you can wear them many days on end without having to wash them, which is great for travel.
In fact, this is her 12th day wearing this dress.
It is. Actually, it's
She
the 15th.
smells great. I'm just kidding. Just kidding. I originally grew up in the Midwest, and then I had a lot of work projects that brought me to the Arctic, and I was working in really remote, really, really brutally cold environments. And it was the first time that I learned about things like long johns, where merino wool was a game changer, because I just thought in the winter you were destined to be cold and in pain. And it turns out that these highly versatile products like merino wool can protect you, keep you comfortable, smelling fresh, pack small, and they serve a lot of purposes. So thank you for sharing that. We've sort of gone into the minutia already of this adventure travel, of this slow travel. Some of the macro ideas I want to bring both of you in for. From your perspectives, so in addition to experiential or slower immersive travel, what are the biggest consumer shifts that you're seeing shaping travel in 2025? And are people prioritizing those experiences, or is it sustainability or wellness, cost savings? Is there something else entirely?
So first of all, going on the merino wool bandwagon here, first of all, I love it, but I actually always want a quick, dry bathing suit with me. And why is that? Because no matter where I am, you never know when there's going to be a pool. And even if I want to go for a morning swim, but have an afternoon flight. So it's the one thing I've been putting in my backpack and actually trying to find the right size and color that kind of matches and all that. This is going to be an interesting year for travel. I think you've got the macroeconomic uncertainty, and I'll leave it there. We're not in a recession, but everyone's talking about falling consumer confidence. And the first thing is your disposable income going on a trip. So I think there's going to be a clear split here. You have your return to office folks. I'm sure some of you in the audience, I'm looking at you. Yeah, you got to go into the office 2-3 days a week now, maybe more. You're not traveling or able to work from a ski vacation as much. At the same time, the pandemic really shifted our focus on experiences and making travel mean something. So probably a few years ago, I would have flown in, done this conference, and left Vegas. Today, I'm going to carve out at least an hour and a half where I promise myself that I will get to explore this wonderful city, even though it's my 21st time here in one way or another. So I think you're seeing a real split between those who do value wellness, or at least personal time and experiences, versus those who might be a little concerned. And before I hand it over, the one other thing I would just say is people really want authentic experiences. The industry is doing a horrible job of slapping an experiences label on everything right now. And I see a lot of people nodding their heads in the audience. You've all been to like some big chain hotel and they're like, ask our concierge about local experiences. And they send you to the TGI Fridays down the road.
I agree with all of that. I think the authentic label is something to talk about a lot, or to think much more critically about before we use it. And I think sustainability is another one too, where we slap that label on things and it's become kind of meaningless. But I think people do want to feel like their travel is kind of working for them in a way. They want to go away on vacation and not feel like they need another vacation when they come home from their trip. I'm sure I'm not the only one who's gone somewhere, had an amazing time, but maybe went to one too many places and then come home and feel like I need another actual vacation now. So I think people want to feel well rested. I've seen, I get so many press releases from companies and from hotels who are doing new authentic experiences, and wellness is one of those things everybody is talking a lot about. Sleep-focused experiences at hotels are a new thing that I've seen. But I think people really want to feel like they are, they have planned their own travel, they have found their own way, and that something is custom for them. So something that I've noticed just as a travel writer is that I've written so many stories about all the places that I've been, but when my friends want to know where to go, they don't want to read my work. They want to ask me to recommend to them exactly what I think they should do, because they want to feel like it's customized to them. So I would say for anyone here who's looking for a way to kind of stand out with your consumers, particularly if you're a retailer, finding ways to kind of elevate that experience and maybe repackage your in-store experience by making it seem like you are giving custom advice to your customers would be a way to really like get an edge there.
I'll jump in there. You know, the rise of travel advisors. Like, we all expected travel agents to be long gone and dead and replaced by AI. They're back in vogue these days, and people want that customization. And I'd be really curious, does someone who buys a purple backpack like a different restaurant than the person who buys a green backpack, or whatever that customization is? But there's got to be a way for that.
That brings up an interesting point where a lot of times innovation, we default to thinking that that means high tech necessarily, but sometimes it actually can mean simplification and the scaling back in the context of what you're speaking to, that human interaction as opposed to searching the glut of the internet for information. Where do you each see the most impactful innovations happening these days, and are they tech driven or are they more analog?
I think when it comes to sustainability, that really is the big innovation. So I'm part of the Outdoor Writers and Photographers Guild, which is based in the UK. And for the last 3 years, I've been on their judging panel for the Innovation Awards. And for the first 2 years, we picked individual products. And then last year, we made a very conscious decision that moving forward, we're only going to, like sustainability is not just going to be a benefit, it's going to be the main thing. Like, we are really, really going to prioritize products that have been made with sustainability in mind, products where it's very clear that the company has designed everything with like the end of life of the product in mind, which is super important and maybe something we can come back to later as well. But I think being able to deliver the same or better experience with a product in a way that's made environmentally sustainably, in a way that's made sustainably, is that like innovations in sustainability are really the most important things right now where it comes to products, I think.
I look at the things that really wow me in innovation to be things that simplify my trip. And I cannot emphasize simplification enough. I have no problem traveling. I've taken way too many flights, go through the airport fine. But if you were to put like blood pressure machines on travelers, you know, your first choke point, what time do I leave for the airport? What's traffic going to be like? Then checking a bag, not checking a bag, going through security, the boarding process. By the time you actually sit in your seat, you've had like a roller coaster of stress and anxiety. So I think things that simplify that experience are great. When you're at a big convention hotel, the ability to do mobile check-in is such a simple thing, but makes a difference, because now I'm not an antisocial person, but I don't want to talk to someone at the front desk. Just give me my damn room key. I'm sorry. I'm just sorry to be that person, but I want speed sometimes. Now, if I'm with my family at a Hawaiian resort, yes, I would love to hear about your spa menu and all that. But if I'm staying at the Marriott across the street from the convention center, I'm sorry, just give me my room key. The same thing. Quick show of hands. Who used their hotel alarm clock in the last year? Yeah, not one of you is raising your hand. You used your phone, right? So why do we still have alarm clocks in our rooms? This is sort of where the innovation is going. Same thing with room service. I do order breakfast room service occasionally, but I'd never do it for dinner. Even if I'm in the middle of nowhere, Uber Eats will come to my hotel. So those are sort of the innovations. Getting back to travel gear, here's my pain point. I'm going to ask for a show of hands. How many of you had to gate check a bag when you didn't want to? Wow. All right. Just about everyone. Why does someone, and please take my idea, have a little pouch inside your bag that has your medicine, a charger, a day of clothing change, and batteries, and you're just able to rip it right out so that when you're forced to gate check your bag, you're not sitting there on the floor scattering, trying to figure out what you trust the airline to check and not.
It's called like the gate check partner. TM, trademark, whoever wants to do that, gave you permission. Yeah, you got to brand it with a name, though, because otherwise it just becomes an amazing packing cube that people forgot why they bought it, and that was to help them with the gate check. So what we're hearing is simplification, streamlining, and building products that have our planet in mind from the perspective of longevity, versatility, sustainable materials. Scott, you were talking about air travel. You've taken 300 flights this year already. You said it yourself. While travelers are seeking out more analog experiences, sometimes, Kassondra, you and I think, have similar styles of travel when it comes to those immersive and slow travel wants. Air travel is still obviously the backbone of global tourism. Probably the majority of us in this room took a flight to get here. How do you see airlines adapting to changing traveler preferences, especially regarding sustainability and also the customer experience on the whole?
I mean, we could talk for hours about that.
We have approximately 40 minutes.
Really quickly, so the first big change is aircraft technology itself. And I'm not going to bore you with this, but essentially a smaller plane can now fly further nonstop. What this means is that completely new markets are opening up. You're seeing United Airlines this summer launch New York to Greenland. And they could do this on a bigger jet, but they know they're not going to fill it. But they have the technology now with a single aisle 737 to fly nonstop to Greenland, and they will fill that plane. So you're starting to see that, the growth in Croatia of travel was in many ways because EasyJet and Ryanair came in there dumping millions of people. So that is going to change sort of the map. People want nonstop flights to new destinations. That goes against sustainability. Airlines need to figure this out, and we can talk about sustainable aviation fuel, but that's probably not the solution. What you are starting to see a little bit more in Europe is the banning of flights for short trips and better rail connections. European airports are phenomenal. You go from the gate almost down to the train platform, and you're starting to see folks like Air France and Lufthansa sell tickets that include a rail journey. So the long distance you do on the airplane, and then the train, seamless connection for your next stop. I do think that is the next evolution of how air travel needs to think about things.
So if you are serving European customers in European markets, maybe the messaging is a bit different because you're aware that those short-haul flights aren't available to folks anymore. If there's a high-speed rail link that's available instead, what gear do they want to carry with them? If the shift if there's a legislative shift in Western Europe toward people having to take more sustainable modes of travel, what does that look like for your product? What opportunities does that present? And a related question for these two is, sustainability is important from a messaging perspective, and consumers are speaking to the fact that they want to make sustainable decisions. Do you think that they are making sustainable decisions when it comes to things like purchasing the flight, or are they still having to make the decision based on cost and availability of the various travel options?
I think that's such a great question, and it's something that's kind of that is the question for every element of the travel industry. And to your point, Scott, about rail journeys, we've also seen travel companies replacing flights with trains when possible. Intrepid Travel, which is the parent company of Adventure.com, did that last year, where they took loads of short-haul flights out of their trips, replaced them with trains. I think when it comes to, can you remind me where I was going with this? Sustainability.
And consumer decision making.
Consumer decisions.
Yeah.
I think people want to make the sustainable choice to a point. So if your product costs twice as much as the version that's less sustainable, you're going to have a harder time selling that product. But if the price point is similar, the consumer will almost always choose the sustainable option. We're seeing Google Flights allows you to see the carbon emissions of a flight now. So you can see whether you're going to save X number of pounds of carbon emissions by taking a flight that's an hour later or an hour earlier, or taking a nonstop flight versus a one with an extra stop. And I think people really do care about this.
And I'm going to poll our travel experts in the audience. Raise your hand if you've actually used that Google Flight function to... Oh, all right. More than I thought, so thank you. I think there's much more of an emphasis on products and sustainability. Was my fleece made of recycled plastic bottles? I look at durability, and personally I'm willing to spend that 20-30% more for a good product and one that I know is sustainable. I don't know that people are making that jump with air travel as much. I mean, my biggest tip to you, obviously use the Google Flight tool, but the age of an aircraft is important. How many stops you're taking. You actually burn a ton of fuel getting up to elevation. So if you are doing 2 or 3 short haul flights to get somewhere, you're burning like twice as much fuel as one really long nonstop trip for the same distance.
I would also say that, which we talked about at the beginning of this conversation, that the label sustainable is something that a lot of companies just throw out there. And if you work for a company that also sells products in Europe, this is going to be something you really, really have to think about, because the EU has been working on legislation to ban greenwashing. And if your product, like, you can't just say it's sustainable without backing that up anymore. So I've seen more companies offering radical transparency when it comes to explaining exactly what it means, like what materials they're using, where they're coming from, how they treat the people who make their products, who find the raw materials. The consumer wants to know this as well.
And in this connected world of ours, this is where you can have interesting partnerships. I don't think any airline is quite going to partner with you, but there are a lot of sustainable tour operators and lodging. Again, what is sustainable? I've seen people define it as, do you treat the local community well? Are you investing back into it? I can see a lot of partnership opportunities there, particularly at the higher end of luxury sustainable resorts and tour operators. And I'm not seeing brands do that right now.
So relatedly, are there any examples that you think are worth highlighting here of travel brands that have really built trust and credibility into their sustainability messaging because they are doing what they say and they're not greenwashing, and people say, yeah, I see you and I'm wanting to spend my dollars here?
I think yes. I think off the top of my head, some companies that really have been very transparent. Icebreaker has a huge PDF that they put out every year that explains all this. BAM, which is a British company that makes apparel from viscose from bamboo. That's who we gave the OWPG Innovation Award to last year because of their super, super transparent explanation of all of their sustainability measures. And I think this is something that I've heard kind of across the board from companies that are international. In Europe, it's harder sometimes for the American counterparts to persuade their European colleagues that we really do need to brag about the sustainability component of something, because they feel like this is just what we should be doing. We don't necessarily need to brag about it. But you do really need to tell the consumer exactly what differentiates you. And you also are driving everybody forward when you do that, because you're creating a competitive edge for sustainability that forces everybody else to try to catch up to you, which moves everybody forward together.
I would just caution, make sure your marketing team is aligned. I cannot tell you how many very heavy, very clunky catalogs I get in the mail, post-consumer recycled paper at least, but think about the fuel and the printing and all the costs there. And these are from brands who are talking about how sustainable their product is. But if you were to look at their net carbon, missions, I mean, just sending out 1 million copies of their 40-page catalog doesn't get me there.
It's a great point. So make sure that everything is aligned and buttoned up when it comes to the messaging, that you're also backing up with action and products when they hit the market, and the way in which they do hit the market. So premium brands tend to have a bit more leeway because they have customers who are willing to spend a bit more on a sustainable product. And so maybe they have been some of the brands that we see making strides with more sustainable products. Do you see budget-friendly brands doing that too? And if so, which ones or which types of products are you seeing?
I think this is something that everybody across the board wants from a messaging standpoint. I think a lot of the innovation is kind of coming from the more luxury spaces, the premium brands that are here today versus brands that maybe are direct to consumer and sell only on Amazon, but don't, like, they're not here today. I think some of the companies that I've seen in the travel space that are really kind of in that accessible space are self-guided travel companies, which allow the consumer, they basically manage all of the logistics for the consumer, and then they book all the hotels. If it's like a walking trip from town to town, like Max Adventure or In Travel, which are both based in the UK, they work really, really hard to find partners at the hotel level that are doing everything right when it comes to sustainability for the community, not just for carbon emissions, but making sure that they're working with local partners, that the food is locally sourced, that everybody is getting paid fair living wages. And I think we're seeing a lot of the innovation come from the top, but it's accessible at every level.
I see this from a very different lens. I look at our infrastructure. And, how many of you have used a water filling station at an airport? Keep those hands up. How many of you would have your hands raised 5 years ago? 10 years ago? Yeah, you'd be really hard-pressed to find one. So you are seeing now Canopy Hotels by Hilton on each floor actually has a you get in your room reusable water bottle type thing that they wash, but they also have water bottle filling stations on each hall. Filtered water, so you don't need the tap water. I'm fine with tap water in the US, but others aren't. I've stayed at a lot of hotels in like Vermont that have their own charging stations for electric vehicles. And boy, this sounds like a Hilton commercial. It really isn't. But Hilton has made a pledge to put in, I think, 10,000 of these over the next 3 or 4 years. This is where the travel industry can jump ahead of others. Now, how do you think about that for your brands? Gets a little bit harder, but do you need to partner with the right person and sponsor water filling stations? I mean, the marketing buzz alone for doing that could be worth it for you, especially if you have a co-branded product in the gift shop at the resort. These are the ways that I think we're going to jump ahead, because unfortunately Americans are not as far ahead as Europeans are in this push.
Could I add to that? I think from the product perspective also, as you mentioned, there is an amazing opportunity here to be ahead of the messaging on this and to kind of retrain the consumer. Something that I've seen a lot in the last 10 years as a gear tester is that we've sort of, and I think gear reviewers, like myself included, are part of this problem, or have been up until this point. We've kind of trained the consumer to expect more from a product than they actually need out of it. So we have all of this product marketing that shows someone climbing Everest, someone dog sledding in the Arctic. How many people actually do that on a daily basis? They want that jacket to go for a walk around the block with their dog when it's raining outside. And this is a problem when it comes to more sustainable iterations of those products, because sometimes the sustainable version isn't going to last in a rain room for 47 hours. No one needs it to last for 47 hours. But if you're choosing between a product that works, is waterproof for 47 hours versus one that's waterproof for 12 hours, you as the consumer probably want the one that's better, even if you will never push it to its limits. So I think everyone in this room has an opportunity to retrain the consumer, to show more backyard adventures, which I think is another travel trend that we're seeing, and to find better ways to market products than to say that everybody is going to climb Everest someday.
That's one thing I'm certain I don't want to do. I don't know if anyone in this room is interested, but also base jumping, too much room for human error. I've done a lot of things that scare my mom. Sorry, Mom, I love you. But climbing Everest is not something I anticipate doing with my jacket. And I think that's a really incredible example of just shifting the storytelling. Playing with different messaging that appeals to the people who, I agree with that, sir. He's stoked on the idea that you could shift the messaging to actually appeal to the consumer that you want to buy your product, whether it's a mountaineer or otherwise. And so far, generally what you're hearing is people want simplification, so streamlined products that serve the purposes that they need, maybe not excess, because they maybe want slower travel, more immersive travel, or just to be able to fit the bag in the overhead bin without having to gate check. And they also, in theory, of course, want sustainable products, but within the bounds of what is possible with their budget and the infrastructure that we currently have. Something that I would love to ask our panelists is, what is a trend that you think is either overhyped or maybe not long-lasting?
All right, you're going to hate me for this. I think the age of the digital nomad, work from anywhere lifestyle is coming to an end. And I speak as someone who works out of one of my clients' offices, works from home, and tends to work from hotel rooms and airplanes a lot. Particularly with some of the economic backdrop going on, I don't think people are going to be able to take that 4 or 5 day weekend trip and still be banking those vacation days. I'm sorry to say it.
I don't necessarily disagree with you, but I do think that there are more countries these days that are offering digital nomad visas, and so it's becoming easier for people to kind of escape and stay longer terms. But I do think we're all going to have to be forced to hang out in person together more.
I would love to be a digital nomad, but my daughter has school Monday through Friday, and someone has to pick her up.
Yeah. I have such a hard time finding one trend that is going to disappear. I thought about this really hard because I think there's such a proliferation of trends that aren't actually trends. I think we have so many people who are very loud on TikTok who do a thing, and then everybody else, I actually don't know if this is the right. Do you re-TikTok something? I don't know.
Where are the youth? Can you answer? You share it. Hello, fellow youth. What do you do on TikTok? Yeah, you share it. You share.
You share it, but
you copy it. I would say
it's not like
retweet.
A copy paste. It's it's not a retweet. It's a different platform.
But I'm sure some of you have heard of the trend of people sitting in their airplane seat, staring straight ahead, not listening to music.
Uh-huh.
We're not going to say what it's called. I don't think that is going to stick around. I also don't think that, I've seen so many press releases about me moons, mini moons, baby moons, retirement moons, which is just a repackaging of things that already exist. But I think that's probably not.
One of the ways that I know I'm aging is I don't know the slang. I don't know if anyone else is like, me neither, and I don't care anymore, and that's how we know we're aging. There are so many trends, and they move so quickly. With the proliferation of digital media, everyone's hopping onto the next hot thing all the time, and then 5 minutes later, it's not hot anymore. The Stanley mug being an example, if everyone saw that wild craze where everyone had to have that 300-ounce Stanley mug, and they flew off the shelves, and it was great for Stanley, but then it wasn't popular a week later. So
the most expensive gifting period for my 9-year-old daughter.
So I think that this is a great point that trends move really quickly. And so to an extent, all the trends that we're seeing are somewhat transitory if they're just for clicks on social media. So what we stick to as an industry is, well, what actually serves the audience that I'm looking to reach? You can hop on a trend if you want to make a reel and you want to appeal to people through messaging. But at the end of the day, don't forget who your audience is. Put them first, and then the rest will come naturally. You can do the dance in your TikTok video or not, as long as you know who it is that you're trying to serve. So at this point, I would love to open it up. If we have any questions, if there are folks who want to ask our esteemed panelists about their life experiences or their knowledge before we let them go. Any questions?
Don't just stand there like you're on an 8-hour flight.
Everyone is suddenly not making eye contact.
We got one in the
Something
front.
I said?
Do we have a microphone?
Yeah, we do. We have a mic runner coming around right now. She's coming around behind you. Thank you.
Right up here in the
Joplin
front.
right over here in the front. Thank you for raising your hand.
There you go. Sustainability is obviously a term that was used quite a bit during this conversation, but recently I got into a conversation with someone in Hawaii, and they said, I think sustainability is wrong because sustainability implies keeping things as they are. And what we need to be talking more about is regeneration. And so I'm just super curious as to how you might talk about and tap into the thought of regeneration versus let's keep things as they are.
I think that's a brilliant question if I can take it first. There's a story that I heard about Westminster Abbey in the UK, and there came a day where the beams within, I don't know if it was the main chapel or the apse, one of the sets of beams had to be replaced, and people were kind of beside themselves with worry because they said, well, trees this big don't grow anymore. So what are we going to do to replace the beams in a building that has had the same ones for 500 years? And I picture it as some wise little old men sort of amble out of a secret passage that you didn't know about. This group of people came out and said, we've been waiting for you to ask the question. We've been raising trees for this purpose for 500 years. There is a company in the room here today who's doing something that's certainly much more modern way of thinking, but I had the pleasure of meeting the team from Monarch yesterday, and they're working with plastics, which are a natural byproduct of our modern human existence at this point, and they're making bags out of them. But then they don't want their bags to go to landfill. They take them back. They make new products. They're looking into ways to utilize the trash that we are creating and make something that is useful of it. So whether there are people who are thinking in 500-year terms and regenerating forests, or they're taking waste and making new products that serve a purpose. I think there are great minds on it and very disparate ways of thinking about solving for that problem.
I look at it as, what do you need for your trip? So let's just start with packing. People overpack. I had a conversation with someone related to me, but I won't say who, and I'm like, there's a laundromat in that city you're visiting. I know you're going for a 12-night adventure. You can do laundry. You don't have to do it. You can even drop it off. It's just, I always try to find a local restaurant when I am on the road because I want to put back into the local economy as much of my money as I can. It's a little harder here in a place like Las Vegas, but if you can do those little things. So I think it's a overall mindset, CEO of a hotel company, once we were having lunch and we were chatting, and he's like, when you're at home, do you change your towels every day? Do you change your sheets every day? I mean, it's not sustainable to do that because of the energy and the water that you're using. So I think a lot of what we need to push the sustainability chat into is what I would call smarter travel.
I think it's such a great question, and I think what we've taken the word sustainability and we've turned it into meaning like this is good, but when you really think about what sustainability means, it's like, can we sustain this? Can we do it forever? And most things, the answer is no. Even if we say it's sustainable, or if it's more sustainable, we could not continue to do it forever. And I think often the question or the conversation is around recycling, but recycling is also not the answer when it comes to products, because we need to think about the end of a product's life cycle before we even create it. We need to, there are some companies out there today, Gomi is one, which makes portable battery chargers from the batteries from e-bikes. So they're like reclaiming materials rather than recycling things. But even that is like, it's kind of like they know that that's not the solution for every company to do that. Everybody needs to be thinking about the end before they even start at the beginning.
And I'll just add to that, like, I take public transit to and from the airport a lot. I live in New York City, and it's not a good connection, but I do it, one, because it's actually faster and easier, let alone the affordability. What's the gear I have that lets me go up and down stairs for the right trip? Is it compatible enough that I can bang it around on a subway or whatever it is? I think all these things are connected in a series of smarter travel and rethinking how we do what we do.
Absolutely. Thank you. So you can be thinking about not only your methodology and the inputs, but also the end result where your product ends up. I think that brings up a great question, so thank you for asking. We have another question in the back. Thank you, Joplin.
It's interesting when we talk about trends, authentic, moons. How about service? Okay, I've been traveling for 50 years. I mostly live out of the U.S. when I can now, regarding service. And it is with goods and the actual services being provided. Hilton used to be great. Now franchises, it's like Motel 6 sometimes. Can you speak about that from your expertise?
So to clarify, what kind of service travelers expect or are looking for when they travel, whether it be with those large hotel chains or otherwise?
They see that the companies are doing to address service?
What are these large companies doing to address service and the needs of the travelers who are traveling with them?
So, full disclosure, one of my clients is an airline, and the airline's mission is to bring humanity back to travel. And one of the things that is instilled on everyone, whether you are a flight attendant, pilot, call center, how can I help? How can I help? How can I help? How can I help? And that mindset is so important. And you're right, not to pick on any one chain, because Hilton, Marriott, IHG, Hyatt, Accor, Comfort Inn, all of them, are basically franchisee models for the most sake. Part of this is changing traveler habits. I remember traveling in, let's call it the 80s, and showing up at a Marriott at San Francisco Airport, and right out front, I still remember his name was Roger, who was the head bellman. And he had the beautiful red cart with the gilded arch over it, and would help us with our luggage because nothing had wheels back then. Yesterday, I showed up at my hotel in Vegas, and they were like, "Do you need assistance with your bags?" Of course not. I had my, wheelie suitcase. I'm sorry if I offended any of you on terms, but I had my 22-inch roller board that moved through. Service becomes a differentiator. And my wife and I went last spring to a small boutique hotel, 22 rooms. I wouldn't call it luxury, but it sure was not a Fairfield Inn or a Hampton Inn. And it was not over-the-top service. It wasn't white glove, but it was like, "Where are you guys coming from? How can we help you? Do you have dinner reservations? Oh, by the way, you've got to check out this winery down the road." That's what I'm looking for. And 95% of the time, I don't find it anymore. It's where you can stand out in this industry. And I'm going to say it's either the super, super expensive high end, and I'm not even talking like Ritz-Carlton, St. Regis, I'm talking a level above it. And I'm talking about the small boutique places.
And for me, after traveling professionally for almost 20 years, sometimes you see that it's a matter of it having come from the top. So if it is important to the people at the top and they're empowering the individuals to be humans and connect as humans one-on-one with the people who are coming through the doors or being served by the company, that makes a huge difference. There was an airline, I won't name it by name, but there was an airline that was having fistfights break out and things like that. You remember that a couple years ago. And there were all of these instances in which it was clear that the team had not been empowered to make human-centric decisions, and then it devolved into really chaotic scenes on multiple instances, and I think really tarnished the brand's reputation. Whereas another airline that I will say, because it's not denigrating, I love Alaska Airlines, and I now live in the Pacific Northwest, and I'll say that, I mean, I haven't been flying them a long time, but every time I fly, the people are kind, and they treat everybody in the waiting area like human beings, because obviously that's coming from the top. They've been empowered to be person to person, and in this fast-paced churn of a world in which we live, where we're all moving faster all the time, remembering to look up from a device and say hi and connect is actually, I mean, beyond our power or our bandwidth sometimes. But when you empower people from the top to look up from the screen, say, hi, how are you? How can I help? Like he said, if that's the training, then we remember kind of how to human together and have a better service experience as travelers.
So, Rachel, you're going to kill me for saying this.
Uh-oh.
No, there was I can mention them. This is the former leadership of American Airlines 1 or 2 generations ago. Used to keep an armed, like with a sidearm, guard sitting outside the C-suite's offices. And this was in their Texas headquarters. You had to go through a very secure door to get in. And one day when I was meeting with the CEO and some people, I noticed this. And I asked someone later, they weren't protecting from outsiders. They were protecting the CEO from his own employees with an armed guard. That just shows how bad the culture was 15, 20 years ago at that airline. Alaska, CEO walks around in khakis and a shirt, very casual, saying hi, uses the same bathroom as everyone else, same coffee machine. That's the type of culture that needs to kind of be out there.
I think this, to bring it back to like retail stores also, for anyone here who might be a retailer or work in some sort of have a customer service element to your company, I think we've been seeing a lot of new AI chatbots. And I'm sure I'm not the only one here who always just responds with like agent, 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 because you want to feel like someone actually cares what your experience is. And I think when it comes to how service in the industry has shifted over the last 5, 10, 20, 30 years, I think it's kind of hard to say whether service has gotten worse or whether more people have access to a level of service before that they didn't previously, which then dilutes the experience for people who used to have it exclusively. And I think one example of that is like the lounges at the airport that you can access with like the Chase Sapphire credit card, the Priority Pass, which comes with a lot of travel credit cards. Now you often have to wait in line, or you can't get in at all. And this is an experience that was kind of promised to you. So again, it's kind of about making reasonable expectations for your customers and then delivering on those expectations. But I think any time that you can offer even just like a modicum of this is for you, we're thinking of you, we are caring deeply about your personal experience with our product, with our service, with our company, that will give you an edge over everybody else.
I think that's a really incredible place to wrap it up. I know we're closing in on time. Thank you for spending your time with us, coming with thoughtful questions, listening to our incredible and very insightful speakers. Thank you again, Kassondra Cloos, Scott Mayerowitz. A round of applause for the two of them.